Uh, Dr. Schiemann, you had spoken about there being a new normal in how people are evaluating talent and the way in which talent's being managed now. Were there precursors to this happening, or was this sort of a shock to everyone as a result of the global financial crisis?
It's interesting. I think there's a little bit part to this because there were signs that over the 90s, even the 80s, of the fact that we have more suppliers out here today than we have customers. And so this ability to deliver value was being really challenged. So if you think about the global market, and then as we start having access to firms in China, India, and so forth, who are willing to come in and offer similar services or better services for less, I think for the U.S., this was probably a pretty big shock. So I think bringing the barriers down has been a trend going on for a while. But I think the global recession allowed marginal businesses who were making okay margins. It wasn't what they were doing in their heyday, but I think they were compromised. And I think it's partly because they didn't have talent operating at this optimized level. They could get away with suboptimal for a period of time, but it finally catches up to you.
Organizations often hear about the cost of replacing an employee.
Mm-hmm.
That number over the years has varied greatly. You see some studies that say it's $3,000, some say it's $15,000, some are even more astronomical than that. In your experience, and from the research you've done, is there an actual cost that can be placed on replacing an employee? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, well, I wish I could give you a single answer, because if it's your local, quick serve restaurant, it's much less than it's going to be medical staff at a hospital. And so I think the answer is yes, you can, but you've got to make it specific for the job. And the challenge here is that we've underestimated that cost for years. We tend to look at, what's the replacement cost? What's the salary worth? The bigger costs are in the impact on customers, lost customers, the relationship of the customers, and the other big was on productivity ramp-up time. So we lose 2 months, we replace somebody, but then it takes us 6 months for that person to get up to peak performance. You're either putting strain on the system of other people to pitch in, but you're also losing some productivity during that time. That's the big cost relative to the hiring costs and some of the replacement costs.
I have to say, I'm actually a little surprised that you say that we've underestimated that cost. I think from an organizational standpoint, there are a lot of companies out there who feel that cost is overestimated. It can't cost that much to replace somebody. We're already bringing somebody in. We've already got 3 people who've interviewed. Is that common, do you think? Do companies misunderstand that and not realize the full cost of what they're missing when they have to replace an employee?
Yeah, I think they do, because they haven't figured in the indirect costs and the intangible costs that are there. We're in a world now where we start to think about that a lot more. What are all the indirect effects of an employee changing? What about the lost knowledge of that employee? It's a knowledge worker. It's a pretty big issue for us, and do we really have the talent on board to replace it? I'd say we're finding numbers anywhere from 3 to 7 times what people have estimated to be the real costs.
That's surprising figures.
Yeah.
Dr. Schiemann, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.